It's great to have a full house this evening on Amplify with Lynette. It's Monday night. We are live in Johannesburg. It is freezing cold, but I am assured that this conversation is going to be hot. If you talk about fire, this one is it. I want to welcome Theo Fenter and Valerio Manzini, my two guests this evening on Amplify with Lynette. We have seen, if you followed the news, you would have seen several legacy foundations withdrawing from this national dialogue. So, what's left? Is it still a democratic reset, or is this just a rushed PR campaign for government? I want to hear your thoughts. If you want to comment, if you want to disagree, take issue with some of the views of my guests, trust me, they can handle it. Just be respectful at all times. Please put it in the comments section. Would love to hear your thoughts. Theo, is this really a PR campaign, or is this dialogue that belongs to every citizen in South Africa? Who owns it?
Lynette, I'm confused by what I'm seeing at the moment. Let me just give you a small background and a brief, and then I'll tell you why I'm confused. Um, I've been part and parcel of the design of the original negotiations. I was a young lecturer in political science, and I got used in the background to help things at CODESA. Um, I had I was instrumental in trying to get Lucas Mangope to participate. He never did. Things like that. So I was involved in a process that brought about democratic South Africa in 1994. And two or three things that I learned out of that process is, firstly, you do a series of bilaterals. In other words, whoever organizes this will go and talk to whoever they identify as stakeholders at whatever level, whether it's national, whether it's NGOs, whether it's whatever, or the associations or the legacy foundations, like you mentioned. Those are all kind of stakeholders. Then, once you've done that, you then arrange for a plenary or a big bash, a multi-party conference or a national dialogue or whatever. Because at that national dialogue, nothing is going to happen. People are going to stand there and they're going to make statements about their position or their issue or whatever they like to. And then the question is, what do we do afterwards? This is the current design. What I heard the president say after the 2024 election, when the idea of a national dialogue or a national discussion must take place, what I heard was, let's see if we can turn that top-down negotiations of 30 years ago upside down. And we asked the people from below to filter up what it is that's bothering them. Basically, we know what's bothering them, but this is to provide people kind of a say in what we're doing. What I'm currently seeing is neither of the two, and more a kind of a situation where the president is in trouble, the deputy president is in trouble, his 30 most eminent persons are in trouble, and they now relying on individuals to make this thing work. I'm a sucker for negotiations. Let me first put my cards on the table. I love it when people talk to each other. But what I see at the moment makes me cynical.
Do you share his cynicism, Valerio?
Most definitely, most definitely. I think for this one, for me, it's quite government heavy. It's more of, or would turn out to me to be more of a monologue than a dialogue, because whatever would actually be discussed there is actually what is actually happening in the streets already. It's more, it needs more of, I think, implementation than only the elite booking venues to go and maybe discuss something without the people consent. It can't be that we get into a dialogue where the person consent or the group consent isn't part of it. So I think for me, it's more of a PR, as you said, it's more of a PR exercise. They're kind of like cleaning their image and not actually putting attention to the person consent, because whatever is going to actually be spoken of there, whatever is going to be discussed there, is long overdue. The topics there actually something long overdue that the person at the grassroots level has actually been discussing all the time. The people at the grassroots level who wants their voices to be heard and who've always wanted their voices to be heard all of these years. So them not being
Can I add?
it doesn't work. Yes.
Can I add to the monologue dialogue thing? I think you're right. And the reason why I'm cynical is at a very, very fundamental level. Lynette, you mentioned democracy in the beginning. What happened in 1994 was the emergence of a democratic project, if we can call it that, because we haven't been a democracy before. Although certain sections thought they were democratic, but we were not democratic as a nation. Now, the moment we entered that democracy, and the key was the 1994 election, then suddenly this broad-based discussion about where the country must go converted into power politics. We now have elected political parties. We have political parties that compete for power every 5 years. We had one party dominating for at least 30 years the political scene. Now we're at a stage where this party dominance of the ANC, let's call it by its name, is kind of moving in the wrong direction, according to the ANC, because everything points so that if we move from here to 2026, 2027, it's going to be lower than 40, not higher than 40. If you listen to the party officials, Fikile Mbalula, he's looking at, again, a 60% party. I think he's misinformed, but in any case, so we're at a very difficult time of the nation. And then Thabo Mbeki came forward and he said, let's talk. And the design, I had a long discussion with Christo van der Rede. He worked extremely hard on behalf of the F.V. de Klerk Foundation and the Mbeki Foundation and all the other foundations to develop a document that would have grasped this moving from below to the top. And then the presidency took over. And you mentioned it in your introduction, government heavy. I think that's a very diplomatic way of saying it.
But this is my concern is the fact that these legacy foundations have withdrawn. Can we still really then say, Valerio, that it is a national dialogue? Because many of those foundations are reflecting what is happening and the concerns on grassroots level.
Well, I think for me, the withdrawal is actually a warning sign. It's a warning
A red
sign that
flag.
maybe, yes, exactly, that consensus and trust are actually fragile here. And when a major stakeholder, for example, maybe let's say the FW de Klerk Foundation pulls out, for us, it is actually something that actually suggests, doubts about inclusivity, or even credibility at a larger extent, whether or not one would support or actually maybe disagree with the politics around maybe a foundation like the FW de Klerk, it's another thing, but their absence actually risks, narrowing the spectrum of voices, or even kind of furthering the polarization of this national conversation. I think it actually undermines, the very spirit of it being national, it being a national dialogue in itself. I think it's, for me, something that would be a dialogue of elites, not necessarily a dialogue that is actually even credible. Yeah.
If we talk about a national dialogue, just lean into your past that you mentioned earlier, Theo, because prior to 1994, we were so diverse. We were not a nation because everybody was serving their own interests. What was the challenge then to bring everybody on board, to sit around a table, to actually share their perceptions, their beliefs, the fact that they can't see us moving, crossing this Rubicon. Help us to understand what the challenges were then, because surely after 30 years plus of democracy, you should be at a place in your country where we can find common ground.
Lynette, I would approach it this way. What happened in 1992, 93, up to 1994, it actually started a little bit earlier, was something that is a precondition for negotiations. And that is when you, as a role player, the National Party on the one hand, the ANC on the other, if you realize at a certain stage that you've banged your head against the wall, you can't go on. The National Party couldn't continue. They had no international support. They knew their rule was illegitimate. They were legitimately elected, but their government had no legitimacy. In other words, they were in a legitimacy crisis. The ANC, on the other hand, lost their biggest support internationally. That meant they had to talk in some way or another. And those two things, whenever you look, let's take a modern case of Israel and Palestine. Israel is not under the impression that they're losing. As a matter of fact, they think they're winning. Therefore, they're not going to negotiate. Russia and Ukraine, none of the two are currently of the opinion that they're losing. Both think they can still win. Therefore, the conditions for talks isn't there. You must create those conditions. Maybe Donald Trump may even get it right on Friday and even get a Nobel Prize for that. I hope not, but let's let's let's
Sorry.
let's watch this one. But the condition that worries me at the moment is that the things that caused the National Party basically to collapse haven't changed. We still have poverty as a major challenge. We still have an economy that's not growing. We still have unemployment. You can make a list of about 10 things easily about the conditions that were there in 1994 and that is still there. In some cases worse, in some cases maybe a few changes, but those conditions are still there. And now the party that was governing for 30 years are feeling, in Afrikaans we would say, hulle voel dit aan die bas. They can now feel they haven't resolved these problems. And now I think personally that's the call for a national dialogue.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yes, because I want to quickly interject there, because I've
Yes.
also heard a lot of analysts say that this is actually just a distraction from what the problems are
The
in our
problems are,
country,
yes.
and facing it. Valerio?
Yes, what I wanted to say then, now that we actually have these present problems, your poverty, your crime, what is exactly going to be spoken of there? What is it to be discussed when it's actually time for actually action? As you say, Theo, that these problems emanate from years back, they've been there, issues of unemployment and all that. Why can't we then say, are we now gathering together and say, what's now the point of action? Because these very issues are the same issues that we're going to be speaking of. The very same. There is actually nothing. Maybe I would say, maybe a newborn baby doesn't know what South Africa is actually suffering from. But even a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old are actually even part of these issues, they're actually even victims of what we've been talking about. So I don't know what the elite, as I put them, are going to talk about. I really do not understand.
You see,
The very
there's
first
also another
time, sorry, Theo, the
there,
first time when we heard the president raise this, there was a lot of hope. And it seemed like past few months that this process and the conversations and what the agenda or the ultimate goal was to bring everyone together, to talk about it, that it's not just a talk shop, that it seems to have derailed.
yeah, well, you see, for the last 10 years, there was at least once or twice a year a serious debate somewhere going that we must have a CODESA 2 again, because we're into this project now. Certain things just doesn't seem to be working. Crime is one that was mentioned here. And isn't it time for us to sit together and talk about the problems? Well, government tried this through a national development plan, which they've spent millions to develop, and they published the first draft in 2012 already. Nothing has happened. Then several other things that we can mention. Let's take one of the best examples, the Zondo Commission. That Zondo was talking a month or so ago saying he's very disappointed. He's now retired, but he's disappointed that virtually nothing of his suggestions or recommendations were implemented. Now, remember, Zondo Commission was a judicial commission. It was an official body, an official institution, organization, if you want to call it that, that presented recommendations to the president for implementation at a very high level. Now, that didn't brought about a lot of change at all. Now we're having a free participatory kind of national dialogue. What on earth would make people think that a situation like this, whatever results is created, whatever proposals are being made, will be implemented? And I'm saying this, that's like I said in the introduction, where my cynicism, maybe it's from being a commentator on politics for too long, but my cynicism comes from this side of the political sphere, where political parties have certain mandates. One party got 40%, one party got 23% or 22%, another one 16%, and so on and so on. That is a proper democratic mandate. That is votes that they got in an election. And I am not convinced that they would give up that vote for a national dialogue saying, guys, let's say, for instance, the national dialogue. This is just a weird scenario. There's a national dialogue and everybody needs internet, but the internet is down. There comes a man by the name of Elon Musk. He provides for each and everybody a small little Starlink, and he said, you can now run your whole national conference on Starlink. I'll pay for it. But there's a precondition. You must change your BEE policies. That conference then decides, okay, government, tone down on BEE, make it more flexible. Do you think the ANC will implement that? I don't think so. So that's just a kind of an example, a weird one, because Elon Musk and Starlink was in my head, to show the difficulty of the results of a national dialogue, where and how. And then what happens in government is we've got one plans, we've got party politics, we've got party programs. The EFF's program book looks like a PhD. It's a thick thing of 170 pages. But then when these things arrive at National Treasury, and National Treasury tells them we have no money, then it all stops. It's a very complicated situation we're in with a national dialogue to get their priorities synced with a government of national unity that is still trying to find itself.
And you're talking about the money, and that was one of the criticisms that I also saw. That where's this money gonna come from when we're all struggling? Are we gonna get 700 million, and to what end is it gonna be used? Where is it gonna come from, and then who's gonna manage it? I want to hear your thoughts about resources and who needs to sit at this table, Valerio, because we had we were all very hopeful, and we had all these various parties buying into it. And I know Theo even said, Christopher van der Wede from the Evie de Klerk Foundation had gone to, with consultation with all the other foundations, gone to so much trouble to create a document as almost as a way to start us off. But now we find ourselves here. So who will be talking about what and to whom?
Exactly. So I think it's a clear thing. It's a clear, I think, tactic or strategy of actually going into the poor persons or the poor people's pockets. Basically, what they're actually saying to us is we're going to literally use your tax money. We're going to actually use your money that will indirectly not even benefit you because you're not even part of this particular dialogue. As I said, it's a monologue. How on earth, the question I always ask myself, how on earth does speaking cost that much? Why is my own voice, your own voice, the voices of millions of people in Kunu, in many other villages, why does it cost so much for me to speak about issues that affect me, about the crime that affects me day and night? Why is it 700, not thousands, not it's billions and billions of money that should be creating jobs, that should be stopping all of these other things. Why does this actual table cost so much for actually even the ordinary South African? It baffles me and really doesn't make sense to me that we even talking about it, that it even actually landed in their minds. It really doesn't make sense for me at all.
There's always a case of timing. Why now?
Why now?
Why this push now for 15th of August, for example, Theo? What are we not seeing?
Well, it was long coming. I mean, the president announced it a long time ago. It was then given to the deputy president's office, Paul Mashatile, and that already worried me, to give this kind of job to him. I would have thought the president will take responsibility himself in the presidency for arranging this kind of thing, not the deputy, because there's also another structure that's not functioning, and that's the structure that was created in the Government of National Unity to discuss critical issues before it goes to cabinet. Issues of, let's say, differences on foreign affairs, differences on the budget, differences on bailout legislation, and so on. That conflict resolution structure that was supposed to be in the Deputy President's office did not work. It's still not functioning properly. Why would that section of government, that department, it's clearly a department, why would that department be better suited to arrange a thing like a national dialogue? Because if you read the documents provided by the foundations, they were talking about each and every town and village should get together, and they should kind of have a little indaba, a little bosberaad, a little think tank, where everybody can say whatever they want to. And then it moves from there to a regional level, and maybe from there to a provincial level or a district level or whatever. And so these things will be filtered up to a plenary that will take place at some time. Now, it can be and we must be open for that, that this meeting on the 15th of August, I think they planted a pen in the ground, and now they have to work towards that. Maybe they will announce it there, that is really what we're going to do. But that means we will only meet each other towards the middle of next year, if I think about logistics and time and things like that. And guess what? In the second half of next year, nobody will worry about a national dialogue because there's a local government election coming. And the moment
Exactly.
we've got an election on us,
Yes.
we're in power politics. We're not in
Mm.
national pratsam territory.
Let me hear your thoughts, Valerio, because
I was
I see
about,
you waiting the mic.
yes, I was about to say that, that we are going to the local elections. So the timing fits that. It's more of saying we are still here, believe in us, we are still here trying to maybe act out something so that we get more votes. And Theo said something in the beginning that for me, I actually agree with that. It's more of an ANC tactic more than anything else. It's more of a ANC strategy to actually
Hmm.
try by all means to maybe take 10% from other parties, 15 from others, and couple up and maybe make up a 60 or something. You know, maybe we're gonna see it resurrect. How? We don't know. Will it resurrect? It's something else, But this particular, and for me, it's very concerning that we are using people's lived experiences, lived problems that they have on a daily basis to kind of garner some support or votes at the cost of so many problems that will even dig deep into their pockets. It's something else. When you dig deep into somebody's pockets, you leave families poor. You leave people really unemployed. For me, a conversation or a dialogue that deepens the problem, that in itself becomes the problem itself. It's really concerning for me. It's really, really concerning. Yeah.
Are we talking about the same issues though? When we say that we want to have a national dialogue, are we finding, and in your opinion, Valerio, is there common
Mm,
ground? Or is it a case of you come with your problems, you come with your problems, and let's just all vent? We're going to vent, and then we decide, all right, these are the parameters. Uh, this is what we're going to talk about. We have had in the past, South Africa's past, Theo Valerio,
mm,
so many opportunities where we've discussed what is wrong. You had said it earlier, Valerio. It's not as nothing new. We
exactly.
live it. We know and the corruption. We've seen the various reports. We've seen the various inquiries, commissions. What has come of that? We're still talking about no implementation. So why should we trust this process? Do we trust this process?
Um, a short answer to actually even your last question is we don't trust it. Hence, credible institutions, credible bodies have actually pulled out. If such pulls out, it really shows that there is something fishy in where the money comes from, in who's going to be at the table, what's going to even be discussed when the streets already have their voices loud enough. They've had their voices loud enough, you know, with topics that would be discussed there. So my issue is or is what's being discussed in the streets when people protest against gender-based violence, against murder, on whose ears do those issues actually fall? On whose ears have they actually been actually knocking on all this time? Is our government really that mute or that deaf to our cries that they need to have tables and dignitaries come and convene and book venues, waste money that should be used to actually tackle these actual problems. I think there is a detach, in terms of the lived experiences and the problems that we have and the government that actually leads us. My actual question would be now, who's leading who and to where are we being led? So yeah.
I almost said the blind leading the blind, but let me go into a little bit more constructive direction here.
Mm,
It seems to me the government is adamant that they will launch on the 16th, which is next week. Now, the president was searching for words, so he said the caravan is on the road. He actually meant the train or the vehicle or the bus. The bus is going. It was a similar metaphor that he used when the government of national unity, our version of a coalition government, was announced. He said, "I'm inviting everybody, but you've got the right to refuse." MK refused. The EFF refused, and a few other smaller ones refused to get onto the bus. So they are not part of the government of national unity. They're sitting on the outside, like Action SA. Sometimes, when you're not on the bus, you can see things are happening and you're not part of it. So getting
mm,
on the bus or not is a strategic decision with a lot of risks. So what I can see is organizations with a certain level of opportunism or that needs a big bellows to make a sound, to show, they will get onto the bus and maybe they will get some of the resources allocated to them or whatever in which way they were doing. But if this process kicks off, I would say the best outcome we can hope for is that they eventually develop through a process. And I'm sure somebody like Rolf Meyer, I know him very well. We worked together. He and Ramaphosa both are very, very skilled in developing processes and developing ways to get things together. They can develop, let's say, a national agenda. Now, this national agenda has on top unemployment. It has in the second place crime. It has got in the third place violence against women and children. So you can list an agenda like that, and then next year, when these political parties all approach us for their vote in an election, you can take this national dialogue agenda and you can tick box. You can say, okay, Party A, about these 10 things that we prioritized, does your party principles adhere to those 10? In other words, now where a party program or a party document of its principles or its policies is kind of the choice of a party, you can almost force them to address these national issues in one way. That could be an outcome. But I think that's very, very far off down in the road. And um, although I'm trying to look for constructive things in this idea, I think in terms of a few research documents and a little bit of survey research and work that has been done by the National Development Commission, I think one can draw up that list as a desktop exercise, not a 700 million rand national dialogue.
I was wondering, whilst Valerio actually touched on it as well, we spoke earlier about the legitimacy then of this whole dialogue if so many voices are missing. And if you've only joined us now, we're speaking to two political analysts, Theo Venter and Valerio Manzini. We're talking about this national dialogue meant to kick off on the 15th of August. We're talking about the process. We're talking about who's leading this. Is it a public relations exercise, or is it really an opportunity for us to reset what our broader vision for our country was? If you have any comments or questions, and you're welcome to be a part of this discussion, because this is what we are doing. We're creating a platform to amplify some of these dissenting voices, the concerns that we have as citizens in South Africa. You might have watched the developments. Now we're at this point where we have to say, well, can we trust this process? If so much money is being wasted, I think Theo mentioned it earlier on. So who's listening, and who is leading? And is, like Valeria said, is it just another talk shop? So I'm keen to hear your thoughts. I will reflect it here, and I'm going to allow Valerio and Theo to respond to it. Dolf Kutsia says and writes here, the national dialogue could make the biggest fools of Ramaphosa and the ANC. Therefore, they have to capture the national dialogue and its outcomes. I'm keen to hear your thought, because, Valerio, is it that simple that they want to control the narrative because they run the risk of being shamed a little bit more?
Most definitely, as you said, it's some sort of a PR exercise, and it being that they are trying by all means not to even include those people who they know would actually shame them. That's why I said it's a gathering of elites. A person as ordinary as myself would never enter through any door there without being met with security asking me what do I want. But at the basis or at the grassroots of this particular dialogue, as my issues, it's the youth in Alexandra's issues that actually need to be addressed. But let me tell you something. A village boy in Eastern Cape, a village boy where I am now in the Free State in Kwakwa, will never, I want to tell you, they will never sit next to any of those elites and say, I'm struggling with 1, I'm struggling with 2, I'm struggling with 3. So they are saying this. They are saying, we are going to discuss things about you without you and determine how your voice sounds, and what actually your voice actually says. And then we are going to make decisions on your behalf. This is nothing new, actually. It's nothing new. It has been the rhetoric. It has been what's been happening. That decisions are made for the larger part of South Africans, and the direction is chosen by Ramaphosa and his ANC. And particularly right now, they are just saying, we are here, we still care, but you know what? Shut your mouth. We will talk for you. What are they going to say? It's another thing.
Do you agree with Dolph's statement here, Theo, that it's a risk control?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Dolph. You'll remember in the beginning I said there's power politics on the one hand, where political parties are competing in the government of national unity, and then there's something like the dialogue, where you take off your party hat and where you act as just a role player in the country at even keel. Now, my colleague already said to play or to suggest that everybody in such a negotiation would be at the same level is romantic. It is not necessarily real. It won't work. There's always kind of a hierarchy that goes up. And the one thing that I can tell you, and I can give a multiple examples, not only in South Africa, but all over the world. Once you've got a certain level of political power, the ultimate survival in politics is to hold on to your power. The one thing that made the National Party interesting in 1994 was they voluntarily kind of submitted themselves to an election which we knew beforehand they cannot win. So therefore you get a lot of people saying the National Party kind of surrendered itself. Now that is very, very seldom that you see that in the world. I can mention a few examples, but it is not something that happens easily, and it only happens when you are down and out. And the National Party was down and out. Therefore, they submitted themselves, therefore, they participated, and therefore, they took the deputy presidency in an arranged marriage for about 2 years. That's practical power politics. Here we are sitting at the moment. I think the ANC is holding on to that 40% for dear life. It's like somebody in the middle of the Pacific Ocean holding on that tube that they threw at him to stay buoyant. If the national dialogue, and I'm telling you, the national dialogue is going to point out an extreme amount of vulnerabilities in ANC policies. They're going to show places that doesn't work. They're going to show which policies aren't working. There's not enough houses being built. There are potholes in the roads, and this. You can mention all of that. That is basically the problem currently of the party with the most votes in the government of national unity, and that's the ANC. I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that kind of situation in a national dialogue, and how they're going to. I mean, if you listen to somebody like Fikile Mbalula this week or last week, in his speech, he suddenly started talking about a fool or an idiot that said this and that of the ANC on TV. Well, he was talking about Prince Mashele. He didn't like the things Prince Mashele was talking about. It was clear that it was Prince that he had in mind. Therefore, the ANC is extremely sensitive about the ways and means of what they're doing. And I've been in a similar position where I've been invited by the Secretary General of the ANC to a meeting of all political commentators a few years ago. And at that stage, Gwede Mantashe was the Secretary General. And you know, Gwede is a very interesting guy. We're approximately the same age. We're born in the same year. But Gwede thinks he's an intellectual. I think he calls himself an intellectual. Now, usually other people refer to you as an intellectual. You don't nominate yourself as an intellectual. But he spoke for an hour. He invited us to talk to him, and then he spoke for an hour. And when he finished, I said to him, "Sir, thanks for the invite, but 10 years ago, I was invited to a similar meeting. It wasn't in Latulia House. It was in Walker Street 260. The speaker was Chris Yennis. And you wouldn't believe it, but Chris Yennis said exactly what you said to us today. He said to us, don't criticize us as the National Party. We're actually good. We're trying our best, but you guys are criticizing us day in and day out. And I'm telling you, Cyril lost it. Not Cyril, Gwede. He said to me, never in your life again compare me with Chris Yennis. I said, but guys, it sounded so deja vu that I've heard it before. I'm telling you, political parties is all about keeping the power they've got. They will not surrender it freely, and the ANC is a political party.
Valerio, so what would we want this dialogue, national dialogue, to look like if we as citizens actually had a say, and it's not being manufactured or managed by other political interests? What is it that our people would want to say? What is the priority when we give the mandate that this is what we expect from our government, whether they are in a GNU or not? What is that message? Because we don't seem to be heard.
Exactly. I think we've said enough, we've actually said enough. And right now, the government has to just do one thing. They have to be the facilitator and not the gatekeeper, and the implementer of the solution. The streets right now are loud enough with gender-based violence, murder, unemployment. All of these issues are there. Whether you switch on the TV in the morning, those issues are on the headlines. We've got court after court, people murdering each other. All of these issues are actually there. What needs to happen is the government, whether in a GNU or not, whichever government, but the government of South Africa, has to come to a point where they say, we've actually heard you. It's time to actually implement. Not listen. We are 30 years into democracy. We are there saying to ourselves, they've actually heard us. They've actually heard us. The truth is, we are heard. However, there is no action. They can hear our cries, they can hear our issues, but they just do not want to act. So what needs to actually happen is that this shouldn't be a stage managed PR exercise. The public will quickly see through this, and especially when the actual real dialogue is actually already happening outside on the streets, on social media, on community units, in community halls. It's actually already there. So what needs to happen? We need a truthful, legitimate implementer, and not somebody who wants us to always talk. Yeah.
And that cannot cost 700 million. I mean,
Exactly.
if there are leadership in the country and communities would like to address issues, you can do it for free. You don't have to pay for it. You don't pay to vote. The IEC must organize things, and you stand in a queue and you vote. It's your civic responsibility. Participating in a national dialogue can also be a civic responsibility rather than some fat cat getting. Because I tried to calculate 9 provinces divided 700 million into 9. So you must. It's going to be a hard sell to spend so much money in each of the 9 provinces getting. So maybe a good idea would be if we start this national dialogue for somebody to stand up and say, okay, I've got a precondition to participate. Anybody that's name has been mentioned in the Zondo Commission or in the Madlanga Commission, for that matter, you're not welcome here.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens
there. And let me just add something there. These people think we actually forget. During election time, you'll have billboards, you've got placards that would be saying your voice counts. This is one thing that actually just dropped into my mind now. And you go to the ballot box and cast your vote, having in your mind that your voice counts. How much do you pay? Nothing. Does our voice really count in this costly exercise? 700. It's really concerning. I'm laughing now, but it's really, really concerning that at this particular time, and you said timing really counts, at this particular time, why is it that my voice or your voice counts more than the one that you cast your vote in? Why is it that the one that we actually did there isn't actually materializing as much as we'd wanted to materialize? Yes, Steve.
You see, and on that basis, where you ask a question, a very valid one, my vote counts. The president should have said the following. He should have said, guys, I want to appoint 30 eminent persons. Can I get a list of eminent persons that you think is important, that you think? And then I will compile the list and we will take the top 30. Currently, my thinking of that 30 eminent people, are they very ANC-like? They're very, very close to that power basis of the ruling party, including somebody like Rolf Meyer and so on. Luckily, the Springbok captain cannot participate. He'll be playing rugby in Australia, so he's out. And I think that the other sports players as well. But that would have been a good start for the eminent persons group to be a bottom up and not a selective process out
Exactly.
there.
So that the people, we, the people, can feel that they made their choice,
Yeah,
that
choice,
they
exactly.
are represented, and not someone else being parachuted, no matter, no disrespect to the current members and their credentials and what they've achieved, but it needs to come from the people. That has always been the fact when prior to 1994, it was the people struggle, the people selected, the people designated, the people mandated. Now we are bystanders. We are sitting on the periphery, and others are telling us this is what you should be thinking, this is what you should be worried about. When we have said we want to say our voice counts, our vote counts, this is the agenda. We will tell you because you are being paid by our tax money, not the other
Exactly.
way around.
And you see, Lynette, it's at that moment that you're going to lose some of the political parties because they don't understand that language. They don't understand. You see, political parties over time develop a very bad habit, and that is a habit of command speech. They tell you what to do. It's very difficult for them to take something in and say, "Oh, listen, guys, this is not how it works." So again, like I said, I'm all for the idea, but I'm very much against the current methodology. And when I wrote an article a year or two ago, and I used the metaphor of Little Red Riding Hood, the story that I grew up with, Roy Kappie. And in the story of Little Red Riding Hood, she there was she and the wolf, and there was the short road and the long road. And then I said, when you develop a negotiation process, you usually take the long cut to get to the short answers. But if you take the shortcut, in other words, the short road, if you take the shortcut, and this is what government's currently doing, you are going to be forced to redo the job again and again. And we are now on the short long cut and not the long shortcut.
Let me give you a better example. It's when you have a pothole and all you do is fill it with sand and a
That's
little
a
bit
little
tar on
sense,
top.
exactly.
And next week you come back, and the week after that you come back. As soon as there's rains, you come back. That's what we do. Surface job. Surface job.
Exactly. Let me just say this now that you're talking about that. I feel like even your sentiments speak to how rushed this particular thing is. It for me excludes the very voices that have been crying out for years. I think a sustainable dialogue requires, for a larger sense, deep and patient engagement. I really think particularly this particular exercise has moved on the surface. They're just moving on the surface and really trying by all means to get their interests forward. If this is being actually accelerated for optics,
Yes.
or maybe I think political deadlines. There is a particular sense that, or a larger sense that it is actually more than anything pushed for political deadlines. And the political deadline that we all know is the local elections. It really risks producing a shallow consensus. It has actually started. They're pulling out credible institutions, credible bodies actually pulling out. So that particularly for me says what's then going to happen, what's going to be discussed, and how legitimate this is going to be with such an amount of money.
I think that there are so many issues. I'm wondering when we talk about what we've done, and
Mm,
I'm astounded that till this day, a lot of our political parties don't get it, that people don't trust them. People trust the civil society. People trust people
society.
that can
Mm,
identify with them, speaks up for them. Organizations like these foundations, yes, but other civic and community organizations, activists
mm,
that have been there for them when they needed them to show up for them, when they didn't have water, when they didn't have electricity, when they are swimming in sewage that is meant for drinking water. That's where the issues are. Those are the people that have come to our rescue that we trust. How can we allow this process to be hijacked under the name of national dialogue when we are not represented?
Yeah, and you see, on that basis, I think the media reported on it over the weekend. There's tension between Mbeki and Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa is the president. He wants this thing to to happen. He wants it to launch. While I think Thabo Mbeki, the elder statesman, realized there are some problems here. We shouldn't do it now. And that's why I think all the stops are currently pulled to get this thing going. But they will have to start and restart again.
If, yes, Valerio, continue.
no, continue.
If by some miracle, though,
Mm,
there is a postponement, or the president accepts that while the Mbeki Foundation is no longer there either, listens to um, other voices other than his little party. Although I should probably not say little party, but the voices that he surrounds himself with. If he's willing to step out from that and look at the bigger picture, is there would the legitimacy, the belief, the credibility of this process be back on track, Theo? Because some of these legacy foundations now feel, okay, we will guide this. Government must step aside. Will you believe it, Valeria? Will you then say, let's engage with this? This is an opportunity.
let
You
me
see,
say this. Okay.
no, you
You
go
should-
first. You go
Okay,
first.
thank you so much. If our eyes were not open to the fact that there is such an amount of money that would have been spent on this, if we didn't know the nitty-gritties of how this thing would have actually taken place, we would actually accept and then stamp it as legitimate. But now, should there be a redirection, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have a larger amount of South Africans saying Ramaphosa and the party is actually caught in the lies. We wouldn't actually say that, you know what, we're actually back on track. It would be us saying he didn't, he and his party didn't think we would actually have our minds working enough to think that 700 million rands would actually unlock the voices of South Africans. It would be us saying he is actually a cat that is now caught in the bag, that is actually trying by all means to see to it that he gets out in any hole. What needs to actually happen here is that they need to realize that they are not dealing with dunderheads. Let me just put it that way. They're not dealing with stupid people. They're not dealing. South Africans are not stupid, full stop. We have intellectual South Africans that know how things need to happen, and we cannot have a government that always digs deep into the taxpayers' pockets like they want to do. Everything in South Africa costs money, and there is nothing in South Africa that costs as little as 5 rand. It has to cost in the millions, in the billions, every single time. And that is not money that is going to be borrowed from USA or the World Bank. it is money that is, particularly when these things happen, it is money that is going to be taken in the taxpayers' money or in the taxpayers' pockets. The actual borrowing happens only when it is something that is to benefit the poor South Africans. We don't borrow when it has to be the elite, and I need to say ANC government that needs to benefit.
Theo?
Lynette, what I would say is that we need to be realistic about this whole thing. South Africa's problems are very, very challenging. And I don't think a single party has got the wisdom in their pockets to solve the problems. And I think we must listen firstly to the electorate, what they said last year. They said last year in no uncertain terms, I want the political parties to work together. I don't trust a single political party with the future of South Africa. That was really the message. And the question now is, can these parties work hand in glove? Because on the economy, and even in the government of national unity, just look at what happened in the last year or so. Firstly, the ANC ring-fenced national finance for themselves until the DA forced them to open up the budget. Currently, the ANC is still managing foreign affairs as if it's their own little heaven where they can do whatever they like to. The government of national unity can't operate like that. The foreign policy of a country must be inclusive and not exclusive. And I think if this thing can make a contribution to bring the reality that they need all of our energy to get the problem sorted out and not a single party's.
Okay, let me quickly ask you this though. If you look at the way the GNU has been managed, isn't there a glimmer of hope though that maybe when they all come together, we can have a bit of a more positive outcome if we have a national dialogue where all these parties come together with the people and we talk once and for all. We actually allow everyone to have a voice, a vote, and not just surrender and tell them, well, you can hijack it, it's all right. We're so used to it.
You know, there's a reason why I'm even laughing now. As long as, I will repeat this, as long as this large amount of money is not included, as long as it's not involved,
Okay.
then we can then say even the ordinary South African in a so-called village somewhere can then be part of it. They can then, the only amount of money that can actually be used is to take those people in the villages and bring them to Sandton, bring them to where this thing is going to happen. Or better yet, not even go to them, bring them there, actually. That's the only amount of money that needs to be used. Get them food, get them whatever they need, have them sleep even in the most luxurious accommodation. Because I think this is exactly what's going to happen when the elite is actually involved in this. This is where the money is actually going. To flights, to luxurious lifestyles, and not actually to opening the ears of these elite people. If this money was going to be used to take them to open and clean their ears enough and exercise, because this is particularly time for implementation and not necessarily even listening. If the roads, the potholes, unemployment, and such issues would get this money to be used in those particular issues, then we can then say we're having some sort of a dialogue, but a dialogue in action.
Yeah, the amount of money seems to be too big of a temptation. And
big.
because of our history and what we've seen happen to budgets and corruption, we are skeptical of this process. Winston is saying it's one big club and we are not in it.
Okay, let me. I didn't try and break down the 700 million. I think just by listening to the amount, I think it's too much. But let's just think about some of the costs of a national dialogue. If the national dialogue were to be taken place and the process suggested by the foundations, then it would mean that we've got approximately 257 local municipalities. There must take place at least 500 meetings, because some of these municipalities include several towns, and you will have a meeting in every village and every town. For each of those meetings, you need a facilitator or somebody that can at least scribe and provide a report. That is a cost item. The hall that you meet is a cost item. Food is a cost item. So if you look at those things and you start making up a budget, then you can see it's not going to be cheap. If you want to visit every village, and I know the Northwest and Limpopo very well, and you've got 10 times more villages than you have small towns. So if you really want that, and then one must remember, if you go to a village like in the Northwest, Mofofutse, it's near the town of Delarevo. The people of Mofofutse would be concerned about the issues of Mofofutse. They will not be concerned about the issues of Sandton. They would like us to take note of the fact that they have dirt roads, they don't have water, they don't have sewage, they've got all kinds of problems in that area. It's a part of the old rural Boputa Tswana that was kept almost like a relic, just like that, for the last 30 years. And we need to hear that, because that's rural South Africa. That's 30 to 40% of the population. And currently, we don't hear them. What we do, we hear them through the mouths and the statements of the chiefs. And the chiefs very often present to us a different story than what's really going on into the ground. So you also need to manage that kind of relationship. Will the people speak out freely? If the chief had a small meeting of his village and he said, guys, tomorrow there are some very brilliant people that's coming here. Remember, your story is A, B, and C, and you will not go to D, E, and F. Then we're also stuck.
Yeah, we've got to keep that in mind. It's not as simplified as we'd like to think. It's, if we talk about grassroots level, that's the grassroots level, and that is part of the national dialogue. And it's again comes to who is dictating what's on the national agenda.
And you know what? If I go to townships, and I go to townships regularly, I really do my bit in the townships. I will not ask a politician, whether EFF, ANC, or DA, about what's going on in that town. I'll get the Omas, I'll get the Gogos, I'll call 20 or 30 of them, and I'll ask them, what's going on here? They'll tell me the truth. The males are not going to tell me the truth. And not the so-called community leaders. They won't do it. But if you ask the Omas, they will tell us. They will start with crime. They will start with unemployment. The kids are running around and they're doing this and dacha and this and that and the other thing and water and so on. So then, so it's as if, and we said that in the beginning, Lynette, we know most of these issues. What is it that we would like to discover in a national dialogue? Or is the national dialogue all about what? Finding each other? I thought we found each other.
What's the purpose of it? Yeah. Are we preaching to the converted? Or is it a case, another club for the elites? What's the purpose of it? What are we hoping to achieve? And when we've made certain decisions, how actionable is it? Are we implementing it? Is this process constitutionally and legally binding? Who can we keep accountable? when those choices and decisions have been made? Or is it again another commission with a list of recommendations and nothing gets done?
Exactly. I just want to add something. When with what Theo just said now. Sometimes we don't actually have to even hear them or ask them. It's a matter of experience. Being there, you can actually see that these people suffer from a problem called crime. There is high unemployment. When you are there, actually being in the lived experiences of these particular people, let me just ask if we can actually get, let's say, Gwedemantashe or the deputy president to go to the crime-ridden Alexandra, to go to the crime-ridden Cape Flats, live there
Ah,
for a
you
while,
might be
would they
out.
survive?
I was about to say, are you talking with blue lights, without blue lights, with bodyguards, without bodyguards? When I
As a
just
normal
sitting there,
person, because these are the issues that are actually going to be discussed there, or that we assume would be discussed. Because if there's anything out of that, then what is actually being discussed there, or is going to be discussed? Is it that they're going to discuss where the money is going to be stashed? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Sorry for saying that, but it's the truth.
yeah, I was gonna, because when you said that, my head just went to couches and mattresses, and that's not what we want to be talking about tonight. What we all can agree in this
Yes,
conversation is that South Africa cannot afford another talk shop, especially one that's over 700 million rand.
exactly.
That's the budget.
Exactly.
We can't afford it. We If we say our voice counts, if we say that we want to be heard, then whoever is part of this needs to provide a legitimate, credible platform for us that
Exactly.
we can believe in, that there is buy in from civic and community movements, so that we say, when we say and we share our problems, our voices are heard. And it's not just a case of, oh, yes, we acknowledge it, honorable member, and that's where we leave it. We don't want that. We want to do differently, not just for the sake of us, for the sake of our children, but for the sake of our economy, for the sake of South Africa. We cannot do the way we've always done it. And I do not know if we as a collective trust the powers that be to lead us, because look where we are right now in the country. Your 30 seconds wrap, Theo, 30 seconds, Valerio, and then I'm going to say goodbye to both of you.
Okay. Lynette, yeah, thanks for the invite. I would say that a national dialogue is a very important event. I think it is way too important to leave in the hands of government. The government may provide a supporting kind of role, but my feeling is if you want a national dialogue to be legitimate, it must be given to the people by means of organizations outside government to organize it and for government to implement their findings.
Yes,
Valerio?
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think for me, a national dialogue is not particularly necessary. It's urgent. But now, what we need to actually be clear on is that South Africans are already having the dialogue. They've already started the dialogue in the streets, they've already started the dialogue everywhere. What needs to happen now is implementation. And the question is, on whose ears are these cries falling when only at this particular time we are now having a chance to be heard or to be given a chance to speak? And who is actually leading this is another thing. So I think, particularly, let us not waste money, but let us act. Let us use that money to actually strategically act. Let us have policy shifts. That's, I think, what is actually needed, and not just a rhetoric or particularly talking. Yeah.
Valerio, Theo, thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm going to say goodbye
Pleasure.
to both of you. I hope it's not the last time that I will definitely invite both of you again. It's not certainly going to be the last time that we have you both as a guest talking about issues that affect us all in the country. Thank you to Dolph and to Wisdom for your comments. Dolph, I'm sorry that we couldn't put it to our guest, but let me just try and bring this in. When Mandela became president, all South Africans valued the importance of unity. We experienced pride and hope. We lost that. We must restore unity and concentrate on the future, not the past. Thank you so much, Dolph and Wisdom, for participating. Thank you, everybody else, for watching and liking the conversation. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please try and go through when you have time, of course, like-minded voices, thoughts, opinions, and differing as well, that you'll find a plethora of different voices and opinions on the channel, and topics, of course, South Africans as well, South Africans succeeding abroad and sharing their knowledge and what they've experienced with others. And I like to highlight them. I like to highlight the voices and other opinions than we normally allow for. Francis Mathe says, I'm late indeed. You are late. We're wrapping up, Francis. But thank you for remembering that we were live. There are variety of videos that you can watch on the channel. Remember, when you engage with the content, when you like it, when you comment, and you don't need to agree with the guests or anyone's opinion, you can share your views. But if you like it, you share it, you comment, engage with the content. It does help and signal to the algorithm that, oh, interesting conversations happening there. So thank you so much for joining me. We will be building and I'll be more live more regularly. It's trying to juggle everything and juggle guests as well. Sometimes during the day, sometimes early morning, and sometimes late at night. But the conversation will continue. Each one teach one. This is the platform where we amplify the issues that affect us. The concerns we share, but also our joy. It's not just all doom and gloom all the time. There is so much to celebrate, and that is what we also want to do. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope your Monday night is a good precedent of what's to be expected for the rest of your week. I know that we were about a bit critical at times, but these are important conversations to have, talking about the welfare, not only of our citizens, but of our country. And can we really afford to have a national dialogue and key voices, the voices of the people, are missing? We don't want to repeat the past. Definitely not. I like what Dolph had said. We want to experience that pride and hope again. I hope you do too. Thanks for watching and participating.